Good afternoon and welcome to this session. Thank you for coming to join us for this BAFTA-sponsored session called A Place at the Table, Why Docs for Kids Matter. My name's Krish Majumdar. I run an independent production company called Me and You Productions, but the reason why I'm here chairing this session is I'm also the chair of the BAFTA Television Committee, so I'm here with my BAFTA hat on today. And I just want to say a few words about BAFTA. If you don't know, BAFTA's a charity, and we don't just put on awards, which we obviously do, the BAFTA Children's TV Awards as well, but we also do events, over 250 events throughout the year across the country, including this one. And BAFTA for me is about two different things. It's about excellence and it's about inspiration. And hopefully in events like this, we can get award-winning program makers to come and share their experiences and hopefully, demonstrate excellence and inspire people. And we've got an absolutely brilliant panel today who are going to share some of their work with you. So on the panel we have, on my right, we have from Drummer TV, we have Rachel Drummond-Hay, who's the co-founder of Drummer TV, and we have Steph Bonaiuti, who was the producer-director on The Boy on the Bicycle, which is a film which we'll be watching clips from. And The Boy on the Bicycle has won 4 awards so far: the Prix Jeunesse Heart Prize, the Prix Jeunesse UNICEF Award, the Prix Jeunesse Best Non-Fiction Award, and the Sanford Award. And also we'll be showing clips from Ice Stars, which has won an RTS Award, I think, which is great. And on my left, we have from 9 Lives, we have the wonderful Kat Lewis, who's the CEO and executive producer, and Adele Martins, who was the producer on Marvellous Messy Minds, which we're going to be showing clips from, and also another 9 Lives film, Our Big Elephant Rescue. And all these films are part of the My Life strand, which is the CBBC strand of one-off documentaries, which is now in its 8th series. And this strand is aimed at 10 to 12-year-olds, and they're all available on the iPlayer. And I've just been told that all of the docs make it onto the iPlayer top 40. So, I mean, that's pretty amazing. And they're shared viewing, so it's not just children who watch this. There's a lot of evidence that parents watch these films as well with the kids. And we have the commissioner here who's also produced this session, Kez, who's down here at the front, which is great. And just going on to more awards, Kat has won 2 BAFTAs for her films in the past. I Am Leo, which has also won a national RTS, and international Emmy. That won a BAFTA Kids TV Award. And Me, My Dad and His Kidney also won a BAFTA Award. And we're going to be showing clips from that as well. So, let's start. Do you want to just say a little bit about Drummer and who you are, and then we'll show a clip from Boy on the Bicycle. So, do you just...
So, Drummer set up. We set up about 4.5 years ago. Me and my other co-founder, Tamsin Summers, we're an indie based in Bristol, and we make a mixture of children's TV and also factual, sort of quite gritty documentaries as well for BBC Channel 4 at the moment.
Okay, should we see a clip of The Boy on the Bicycle?
Yeah.
We should play the first clip, please. I mean, this is a hugely ambitious documentary. How did it come about? I mean, it's set in a refugee camp in Jordan.
Yes.
So how did it come about, and how did you get access to it? And
well, it kind of came about because of Sheffield last year, where I met Jeannie, who's sat in the audience here, who's from UNICEF, and she was looking in her kind of role to find companies that are making children's TV, and we had a meeting with her and started talking through various ideas. And we heard about Zatari, and we thought about sort of a programme that showed the lives of children in refugee camp, which is what we pitched to Cares at CBBC. So we got the commission and worked really, really closely with UNICEF to kind of, because the access is obviously quite difficult, refugee camps are very used to having news crews and kind of people coming in and out filming a lot of the time, especially Zatari, because it was a relatively stable refugee camp. But for a documentary, which is a kind of generally requires a longer time of filming and production, it wasn't really something they were used to. So we worked quite hard, didn't we, to get a maximum number of days filming, which actually didn't end up being very many days. We got Steph on board, who's an incredible producer-director, who's worked all across the world in really kind of high-risk areas, and sort of went from there, really.
That's a really good introduction to that film, and I just want to introduce the other film, which is our kind of two big case studies this afternoon. That's Marvellous Messy Minds. So can we play the second clip, please? So Kat, mental health with children is really quite a difficult subject. I mean, how did that come about, and why did you want to make this film?
Well, I'm really passionate about making programmes about mental health, so I've made quite a few, but hadn't done one for children. And the reason why I wanted to do it is because, the suicide rate keeps going up, and a lot of people who do take their own life, and I've been affected that personally, with two close friends and actually one of my brother-in-laws. So this is why I'm so kind of driven and passionate to make these programmes. Because what I felt with this programme, it was an opportunity to really educate children about what mental health is, every different aspect of it. So when you watch the film, which will be on iPlayer towards the end of this month, there are lots of different layers to it. So, for example, we chose 3 children with 3 different conditions. We had to make sure they were resilient, and we're going to talk about that later, and that the parents were happy for them to talk about it. But we also made sure that they each had conditions that weren't too extreme. Like, for example, I think it'd be very difficult to make a children's programme about anorexia or about a condition where children pull their hair out, because those are conditions that children could imitate. Children watching, and we don't know if they're protected when they watch. Kez brought the idea of kind of doing the kind of top tips, but each of the children, who are all incredible and their families are incredible, they each have a very simple goal that they're aiming to achieve in the film. And it's things like, for example, with Libby wants to walk to school on her own. She's 15, she's never walked to school on her own, and she needs to overcome that goal. So there's the positive message through the film that you can actually learn to control your mental health condition. And that's what's really important. And because of having 3 different mental health conditions within it, we felt that we were really kind of emphasising that. And Kath in the front row here, wave your hand. Kath's company, Fettle Animation, did all the very, very beautiful animations, and we felt that kind of added a layer, because obviously when you see the children, the contributors, actually then animated versions of themselves, it's entertaining but also educational, because all the animations I think add tremendously to it.
I mean, what's the difference between making documentaries for kids and then for grown-ups? I mean, what would you say that, so you make programmes, a wide spectrum of programmes, both of you do. What would you say the key differences are?
Well, I think there are certain things that are very much the same. I think you've got to have strong narrative arcs, and you've got to think hard about that. I think you've got to have great contributors and cast them. I think there's got to be a reason why you're making this film now. I think ideally the subject matter won't have been tackled before. If it has, you're doing it in a different way, so you're bringing something new, so you're answering all those kind of questions that you would answer whoever your audience was. But then you're kind of thinking really hard about, how you ensure that you make everything entertaining as well as educational and informative and totally accessible and engaging for a young audience.
I think also with something like a refugee camp, that obviously for our British audience is sort of worlds away, kind of looking at things that are really kind of clear points of reference. So the fact that, Ahmed loves his bicycle, lots of kids love bicycles, or there's humour, or listening, or the music as well, I think is really key, often bringing kind of contemporary tracks that our kids here kind of identify with, and yet, it kind of fits on a documentary as well.
Should we watch the third clip, please, from Boy on the Bicycle? I mean, Rachel, what do you think that clip shows us about the kind of differences between?
Well, it's kind of the similarities and the difference, because obviously every child can relate to school, but I mean it's so different, because there's a young boy kind of putting on his own school, and all those kids just looking forward to the weekly session with Ali. And he's kind of learnt his teaching style, I guess, from when he was able to go back to school back in Syria. Whereas here, majority of kids don't want to go to school, don't like school, but the fact that they can kind of relate because it's school, it kind of draws them in, and then they see such a different version. So I think it kind of, it's very engaging.
And we'll get on to the specifics about casting and making that film very shortly. But just in terms of one of the earlier clips we saw in Marvellous Messy Minds is such a kind of mixture of styles. You talked about animation. Why do you use it?
Well, I think it is a case of kind of getting that level of entertainment, isn't it, Adele? So that the children can engage, with the film kind of more immediately, in a way that, we want to kind of make sure that these films are entertaining. Video Diary, I think, is very important, because when we first started making films with Kes 4 years ago, and I think we were the first to get Raphael to voice his own narrative. That's the one we won the BAFTA for, that we're going to show a clip of later, the Me, My Dad and His Kidney, because we wanted, that's what we'd been doing for in our BBC Three films. We'd always got our contributors to voice their own narrative, and it's just very important because it empowers the children, and then the children at home are watching films, that are voiced by young people just like them, and I think that kind of is another way that you can kind of make sure they come to the subject and fully engage with it.
And how do you do the video diaries? Are you there? Are you filming it? Are you directing them? Are you kind of helping them, scripting in a way, or is it? Do you just leave the camera there, and how does it work with either of you?
In terms of, just wanted to go back to the sort of animation. One of the really good things about animation is it simplifies what can be quite scary, quite complicated issues, and that's really important when you're talking to young people. They're trying to get a handle on what you're talking about. So in terms of, My Dad's Kidney, it was very much about what are my kidneys, what do my kidneys do? So using the animation was a very simple, easy way of explaining that to a young audience. But in terms of back to what you've just said just now about video diaries, we leave the cameras with the youngsters and we gently nudge them, because in a way it's almost like homework effectively for them. Obviously we're looking at it as their opportunity to voice how they're feeling in the moment, because obviously when something happens, we're quite keen for them to say, well, this has happened to me today, this is how I feel today, because you want to get that off the cuff, you want to get it as it happens, or not too long after it's happened. But sometimes, as with anybody who's parents, who's around children, you have to sometimes remind them, have you done your video diary today? And it's like that, it's just gently reminding them.
But do you think also that kids nowadays, they've got phones, they're always, video blogging, FaceTiming each other, in my day we might have written a diary. I wrote a diary, but nowadays people, that's the currency, that's what they do. So do you think they're better at that, and they go online to see Zoella or whoever?
I think on the whole, in the main, yes. But in terms of one of the youngsters that we dealt with, it's really funny. You should talk about being on the phone. He didn't use a phone.
Oh, right.
So it was an additional issue for us, because he didn't use his mobile phone. That was part of his situation.
Didn't like it.
He didn't use mobile phones.
Right.
So when Kat was talking about Libby not being able to walk to school on her own, Ethan didn't like talking on the phone on his own at all.
So that was his kind of what he was trying to overcome, was the confidence to kind of communicate, particularly using the phone.
Yeah. And how do you find video diary in the work that you do?
Well, we use it. I mean, in iStars, which is our series, we use video diary. Well, we use sort of selfie sticks, so kids are quite often given their own GoPros to kind of record in the moment. But Steph as well, in Boy on the Bicycle, you left it because we were very restricted with timing, so you could only film between 9 and 3-ish. So
I guess I'd add a little bit, sort of like we left the video diary with Ahmed, so we left him a little camera.
But did he know how to use it?
Absolutely, he was very literal, what would be the right way of saying it? He knows the visual grammar of video, and I was actually really both impressed and tickled by all the rushes that came back. because he actually went and interviewed each member of his family, but then would do video diary with him and his little sister. And so actually all the content of the video diary he gave back to me could have been a whole standalone film in itself. I mean, I'm not sure you can show the clip, but he's doing the Michael Jackson moonwalk, where he's doing intimate chats with his other cousins. And so there's a sort of an accessibility to his life that we were never going to get if there was a camera crew, sort of an intimacy. And I thought that was really beautiful. And it shared a lot of intimacy in his life with us through that.
And do you find there's, do you think that kids are almost better at doing video diaries than adults, or?
Yeah, definitely, because they are much more, it's nothing to them. They've got their phones, they're doing it anyway. But all the kind of vloggers, a lot of the vloggers anyway, it's quite a kind of pink, upper middle class set of vloggers, isn't it? If you think about it, it's quite a kind of, in that sense, quite an immature, part of kind of modern medium and modern communication. And what we wanted was, in that section that we showed of Ethan, we wanted that kind of rawness, that kind of, as Adele was saying, it's just happened, he's just been expelled. That's actually a lot better for us as well, in terms of we're not, in anybody else's words, talking about Ethan having, been excluded, I think it was, rather than expelled, wasn't it, from school? Excluded. He's actually telling us, and then his parents will get an opportunity to watch that with him. We'll discuss how, it might be for him if that's put in the programme, and then we'll have a big discussion. So it's kind of part of the compliance process, but it's also part of the fact that this is his story. It's very raw, and he's telling us it. And that's why it becomes kind of a really brilliant medium.
And also, just in terms of logistics and budget, you can be in many more places at any one time, which helps, especially if you've got 3 contributors across the country.
And just before we leave, just remembered about animation. We actually do have a clip of
Be My Dad and His Kidneys.
Yes, kidneys. Can we play the kidney clip, please?
That animation was actually done by John Whittingdale, who's also done the title graphics for the My Life series. He's from Flicks, so it's a different graphic artist, but beautiful, but in a different way. Not the culture secretary. John Whittington, isn't it? Sorry, muddled up.
John Whittingdale's the prostitutes. No, someone else. Okay, good. It's a kids session. So that's good, but don't graphics cost a lot of money? And kids' TV, I mean, My Life, this is published, so I hope you don't mind me saying, it's 50 grand per episode, which, I mean, the ambition of these films is extraordinary. I don't make kids' TV, and I watch these films, and I was like, I'd love to make kids' TV. How much do you get for a budget? And it's 50 grand, isn't it? But then people can add to that. But it's huge ambition, and if you're doing things like graphics, how do you, because those graphics don't look too cheap?
No, they're really, we do spend on the graphics, but it's within a limited budget. So, Kath and I sit down and kind of say, right, this is what we're trying to achieve. What can we do realistically? And then it is a kind of set fee for a set number of graphics. So we're kind of doing quite a lot of storyboarding and, planning before we get into even the filming, so we know that we've got strong narrative arcs, we know where we're going to use the graphics, and we use the money judiciously. I must mention the tax credits though, because you can get tax credits now on programmes like this, and it's only about another 5 grand, but it does make a difference. It makes it easier.
Can you just explain that for people who
Okay, so what you have to do is you have to apply to the BFI. This is something that PACT, I'm on the PACT Council, former Vice Chair of PACT, and it's the Producers Alliance for Cinema and Television. And so we push this through with a lot of support from CBBC and other children's producers. And so what it means is that you can apply, you've got to kind of fulfill certain criteria and quite a lot of paperwork. But once you get kind of approved, then you can get the tax that you would pay part of your corporate tax bill as a business, you can claim back a certain amount of that as a tax credit. And it works out about 5 grand on a 50 grand budget. But it is helpful, especially with, when you want to spend money on graphics, etc.
Okay, well, that's useful and practical. Something also I've noticed watching these films is humour is such a good ally in making these films in terms of trying to keep an audience's attention, especially if it's a young audience. And how do you use humour in the kind of arsenal of your filmmaking?
Well, I think with Boy on the Bicycle, obviously, it was a lots of the kind of, well, the whole issue of refugees is a very kind of sad area. So it was really important to kind of not be looking for the kind of, the tragedy, but actually looking for humour. And I think, Steph, you kind of went out, didn't you, with kind of don't go out and just shoot everything that's going to bring us everybody down, but go out and look for the kind of the light in the darkness. So
I think within that itself, I mean, the situation, the experience of the kids is not a positive one, but I think children within their spirit, there's that playfulness.
Yeah.
And so to find that playfulness and engage that playfulness is very easy. And so to be sure that you're filming those moments of play. And I mean, the best way to communicate with kids is through laughter.
Yeah. And there were kind of very dramatic moments with the weather, weren't there? There was kind of sandstorms and rainstorms and all sorts, within the 4 days you were filming, but still kind of without, coming out of that, there were some lovely moments of just kind of kids splashing around in puddles and kind of the excitement of a kind of big desert storm, which I think, again, is something that kids relate to because, like you say, it's all play and it's really important to kind of bring out the humour.
I mean, can we just see clip 5, please, from Ice Stars? This is a humorous clip, I think.
Yeah, so this is Ice Stars, which is a 10-part series. We made 2 series for CBBC, so it's not a My Life.
I mean, all TV is about, making programmes is about casting, and casting is so crucial, especially when you make children's TV. What have been the kind of challenges about casting? We're going to drill down into the kind of Marvellous Messy Minds and Boy with a Bicycle now and look at how you made those shows and the kind of challenges and difficulties and how you overcame them. So with casting, how did you go about that? Did you just go over to the camp in
So, I mean, there's a whole process that happened before I got on board. I mean, I don't know if you want to start that and then I can pick up.
Yeah, so before, because Steph kind of came on board, literally flew out and kind of was there, bam, ready to kind of pick up the project and run with it. Before Steph, we had an idea of what we wanted. We wanted to find somebody who could be a kind of tour guide. We wanted somebody who could speak English. We definitely wanted a girl. And kind of, we talked about various kind of activities or kind of things that they, might be exposed or not exposed. So we kind of knew the parameters of it, but, there's a huge refugee camp and UNICEF put forward some people before we went, but it was really kind of like, we kept saying, until we're actually out, we meet these people, they might be great poster kind of kids, but we need to actually see how they are on camera. So sort of sent Steph out with Jeannie, and you had, I think, 3 days to kind of basically familiarise yourself with the camp, familiarise yourself with all the bureaucracy of working in a refugee camp, and most importantly, find our characters.
So how many kids were there, and did you see? Were there hundreds of kids, and how does it work?
Hundreds of thousands.
That study is made up, has more children than adults. So
how did you narrow it down to in 3 days?
Well, I mean, we work so closely with UNICEF, and truthfully, it all comes down to one man, Abdelmajid, who works day in, day out with the kids. So he has a very intimate relationship with a lot of the families. And so it's through conversations mainly with him. He's like, I know this incredible young girl. She loves football. She's absolutely stellar. You're going to love her. Come and meet her. So I think over the 3 days, we probably met 10 kids. And by the end, we filmed with 4. There's one incredible young woman who ended up not making part of the show, Amima. But I think besides just looking for the right characters in terms of somebody who's articulate, forthcoming, expressive, it's also looking for those story elements because there were certain topics that we wanted to discuss within it. Child labour was one of them. That was touched on quite lightly in terms of families broken up. Ola's story is very much about that. Kids and school, that's what Ali's story is about. And the fact that kids are getting half the amount of education than they would normally. And then we very strongly needed to find somebody who spoke English who could carry the story. So we weren't doing subtitles or we weren't doing voiceovers.
And how did you had to get the parents' consent how did that all work?
Ali, we first met him with his parents, and they were just an extraordinary family. I mean, all that warmth that you see from Ali that exists in the whole family, a real generosity of spirit. Many of the families, the kids are only go to school for half the time, and so if they're not at school, they're more likely to be home. Adults generally aren't allowed to work, so they're just at home. I mean, it's a very sedentary lifestyle, and so being able to find people was relatively easy. So yeah, it was very much sort of sitting with the parents, explaining what we were doing, again with UNICEF there, who's got very good relationships with the family, introducing me, sitting down with them, talking to them at length, and once they were sort of happy and had given us permission, we were sort of moving forward to deciding what we were going to film with the kids.
And was this your first children's TV programme? Because you normally direct, I was going to say adult.
I
adult
do
movies,
shoot after material.
but not adult movies.
Very gritty.
Yes, gritty documentaries. And how did you find casting the kids? You probably done films with kids, but not for a kids' audience. But how did you find, what were the differences working?
I think, irrespective if you're working on an adult's documentaries or a kids' documentary, it's all about intuition, sort of somebody that you connect with, someone whose eyes shine. It's a human thing more than an age thing, yeah. I would say. So that's always quite easy. I think you know when you've met someone whose story you want to hear, yeah. Who's someone's life you want to be able to get access to.
Can I just move to Marvellous Messy Minds, because you cast 3 quite extraordinary young people. How did you go about that, and how did you find them?
About a year prior to working on Marvellous Messy Minds, I'd worked with a number of mental health agencies, and we were looking at youngsters and the fact that quite a lot of the monies that funded mental health care for young people had been removed, basically. So what that did was it put me in touch with a number of agencies. So when I was brought on board to make this and to find the youngsters that would be involved in this project, I went to those agencies and I spoke to the people who ran all the various groups. And when you work with children, you have to start with the parents, and you speak to the parents about what it is that you're doing, and you say to them, would it be all right for me to come along and meet your child or your young person? And exactly what Stefania just said, it's about when you meet that young person, does that person want to do it? Because you might have parents who say, oh, my Sally's going to be fantastic, she's wonderful. And when you meet Sally and she's like, ooh, she's hiding behind the sofa or something. So you've got to feel that the young person gets something out of it as well. So when I was talking to Ethan, one of the things I found about him was, even though he was participating in a project for us, it was very important for him to do it, because I felt, listening to him on his own, that there were a lot of things that he wanted to say about his situation, about himself, but not just to his peers, but also to his parents. So he was kind of using us as a way to channel some information through to his parents about how he felt about being Ethan. So he was instantly, yeah, we're going to work with him because he wants to do it. He's got a really good reason to do it. And he's got a challenging issue that affects a lot of people. So you just make sure everybody's involved, everybody that's involved wants to be involved, and for the right reasons, really. And also, because it was mental health, you want to make sure that they're going to be okay. So the word resilience is used a lot in mental health, and it's really important that the young person is going to be okay at the end of it.
Can we just see the clip with Ethan and his dad? So that seems like a really beautiful relationship. Did Ethan's dad? What was the kind of process to get Ethan's dad and then Ethan on board?
That was a really interesting process, because Dennis, Ethan's dad, did not want to be involved at all.
No, he looked like he loved doing it.
I know. And again, it was about finding something that worked for Dennis. So I sat down with Dennis and I said to him, genuinely, it's about Ethan, it's about Ethan's story, absolutely 110%. But Ethan comes from somewhere, he comes from a family, he has support at home. And it'd be really good to see a young person who, even though has that support, is still finding things challenging. And also looking a little bit at the fact that Ethan is a person of colour, he's a black boy. And a lot of people from the black community aren't always the first in the queue to access mental health agencies because of all the various fears that they have of what's going to happen to their family afterwards. So it was a good opportunity to actually say, well, look, here's a young person, he's a person of colour, he's accessing agencies, and it's working. If you need help, you can go out there and work and make it work for you. But Dennis, once I sat down and spoke to him about how important it was, not just for him, not just for Ethan, but for children across the UK, possibly across the world, he thought, okay, yeah, I'll get involved with that. But, you know, there was quite a bit of touch and go. Sometimes he was really happy, sometimes he wasn't so much. But it's about keeping the conversation going, being really honest with people as well. Because I think people in TV have got this kind of reputation for not being 100% truthful with people. And you've got to be honest and just say, this is what it's going to be. Can you handle this? Is this going to work for you? Because if you try and tell people fibs, it will come back and bite you later on.
I mean, this is a good point to talk about the ethics of working with kids. I mean, do you, when I make documentaries and you have vulnerable people, we have something called the psych test, where you have a psychologist come and assess the suitability of the person's mental health to appear on television and what the effects that could happen of being on TV, and will that affect their well-being, and will that put them in danger, and it's about passing the psych test or not. And sometimes there's a pressure, TV executives, oh, I love this character, we've got to get them on, but they're vulnerable, they're suffering like mental health issues. Here you have children with mental health issues, and obviously you want the best characters for your film. So how do you balance trying to get the best characters and also their well-being? And did you psych test the kids, and how does that work, and what are the safety measures that you've got there?
So even though we had 3 different mental health experts within the programme, that was deliberate to show there were different ways and different forms of treatment, we got an independent person to do the psych tests who's experienced in doing psych tests. And one thing that we take very seriously, and CBBC obviously take incredibly seriously, is the pressure on social media. Because when you make a film these days, it's going to be out there. You know, you're telling your story. We have to put our hands up and say we can't pretend it's not going to appear somewhere on the internet. It is. So we're very upfront about the whole influence of social media. But the independent psychologists that we use Emma Kenny a lot, who's based in Manchester. She does the psych tests independently. Now, I have been told as an exec before, not on this programme, on another programme, that actually, you know, the contributor that we had wasn't strong enough. And that was, we were kind of concerned anyway. I mean, all the contributors on that particular show, because it was another one about mental health, were being psych tested. And, we were absolutely 100%, I'm really sorry, but, you know, we've been told that it's not possible for you to appear in this programme at this particular time, but we'd love to work with you in the future, so let's keep in touch. And you have to kind of have those conversations, because for us, the long-term welfare of our contributors is honestly first and foremost, and everybody at 9 Lives knows that, don't they? That's the most important thing. So that's how it works.
Okay.
Can I just add
something
to that? Because, I mean, I think psychology is one side of things, but I think also in terms of Zatari and the children there was other potential implications for people being involved. And having done a lot of television with people who are vulnerable, not necessarily just this programme, I think there's that strong feeling that once a film crew leaves, you can't have left a mark on those people's lives or left them vulnerable in any way. I mean, like, one example is young Mohammed, who is the child who works in the bakery. He's got that job because it's his uncle who's given that to him. I mean, he gets paid $1 a day, roughly, and we were asking him about his life, but we were only allowed there on the permission of his uncle, and so for him to be able to speak openly or freely was nearly impossible because of both his uncles were there. And so sort of trying to be able to have a conversation about his life in a way that wasn't threatening to him, wasn't going to threaten his position or his relationship, because things were very delicate. It was a very, very delicate balance. And I think when you go into whichever situation you're in, not to just go with, I'm trying to get a story, is get as much information you can about each person's individual context, because there's all sorts of things, ramifications that you may not know and understand. And when you leave, you need to make sure that that person's life and relationships are still fully intact. So
I think this is a good point to show clip 7, the Ola clip. So why did you cast Ola, and why was it important to have her in the film?
I think there's two things. I mean, first of all, Ola's just this incredibly radiant, beautiful young girl. But there's, besides all the personal attributes, it was also looking at the situation that she was in. I mean, on one side, we wanted to break some of the molds of, it's usually boys and football. And I think especially, there's a lot more than what the clip's just shown. She's one of the, she still doesn't wear a headscarf, but she's about to enter puberty, and when she does enter puberty, she will be wearing a headscarf. And she comes from an incredibly traditional family, to the point where even her mother or any of her aunties or other female relatives would not appear on camera. It's just not the done thing for women to do. So the fact that she's kind of living on the cusp of having absolute freedom as a child before she enters womanhood. And she talks about that in that clip a little bit further on. And one of the things within the camps is child marriage. So that was one of the things that we wanted to touch on very lightly. We didn't go into it too deeply in this edit. But equally, her family is absolutely splintered. Her dad hasn't got permission to live in Jordan. He's actually in Germany. And so there's another very touching scene where she's actually the second mother of the family, where she plays the second parent. And so it's her communicating with her dad via WhatsApp messages, because there's no other way of being in touch. She hasn't seen him in a year, and she probably won't see him for many, many more years. And so it was just finding those opportunities where people could share those ruptures in their life and be very open and heartfelt about, what was going on. And she was incredibly articulate, and just, you can see for yourself, she's a very vivacious young woman.
She's a really great character.
And we didn't want to have 4 boys, basically. You know, it was really important that we had a girl, at least one, represented. So, yeah, we were very, very lucky with her.
I mean, there are big, big issues in this film. He talks about child marriage. I mean, are there anything off limits? I'm sure there are, actually, with kids' TV. I mean, unfortunately, kids face all sorts of issues, like sexual abuse. What is off limits for children's TV, would you say? Is there anything off limits? And in the films that you made, Marvellous Messy Minds and Buying the Bicycle, did you have to think, I can't really touch on that?
We had a whole conversation before we went out to film specifically about children's child marriage. I think there's at least 1 or 2 weddings a week in the refugee camp with underage girls. And in one sense, we thought it might be interesting to touch on it, because it's, it is such an issue that is happening to these children. But at the same time, we thought it was just too big an issue really to go in within this programme. And we thought it was, it's something that's so kind of far removed from the experience here that it was just one step too far. So we did very, very lightly touch on the kind of the wedding shop, because there's an amazing shop that sells wedding dresses for all these weddings. And also weddings are quite a focus out there, because they're a moment of celebration. So there's kind of big parties, and everybody kind of, joins in, because there's not a lot, as you were saying, Steph, about that goes on, because people can't generally work. So it was quite a difficult kind of decision of whether or not we kind of went to a wedding, but then equally seeing a 13, 14-year-old getting married.
To who? To what age? An adult or?
It depends.
Yeah.
It depends. It's, everything from a 16-year-old boy all the way to a 50-year-old man. I think I've got that right.
And what about you?
Well, for this particular programme, Marvellous Messy Minds, it wasn't a huge issue, because I don't think none of our contributors would have talked about, for example, suicide. But in I Am Leo, which was the first CBBC film with a transgender child that we made last year, Leo did at one point talk about the fact that, you know, if he hadn't been able to become Leo, he would have not wanted to be around. And it was as kind of subtle as that, but nevertheless, we did feel it was kind of too much and we just didn't want to go there, even though a massive motivation for making that programme had been the very high self-harm and suicide rate and attempted suicide rate among transgender young people. So that was a big motivation for us to make the film, but we didn't want to go there because the audience for CBBC is 6 to 12-year-olds, and so it's just really important that you know, you acknowledge it might be a 6-year-old watching. And when we make our films, we usually get a panel of a kind of 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, whoever's got kids in the office that are around and are able to kind of watch that weekend. You know, when we get to that right time in the edit, we get this kind of kids panel to watch and make sure that they can understand everything. And equally within kind of I Am Leo, we don't want a film to become a kind of sex education program. And in that sense, it's kind of, you know, because especially because within these programs might be watched on their own by a 6-year-old, and therefore, you know, you can't guarantee that the parents are there and there's going to be that context for discussion that you would want. So it's got to be something that isn't going to, you know, confuse a child and isn't going to take the film in a way that parents would object to.
How do you stop patronising kids? Stop kind of talking, I mean, we're all adults here, and now that I know different sets of kids who've had different life experiences. Some are very worldly wise. Some, you know, 10 to 12-year-olds, they might be watching adult material, you know, just streetwise, whereas some other kids from different backgrounds might be more sheltered. How do you stop? Where do you kind of pitch it? And do you have to kind of check yourself or...
I mean, I think firstly the assumption that we patronise kids
No,
makes me smile.
No, I'm just saying, how do you stop? How does one stop? I'm not saying that you do.
No, everyone's an individual, everyone's a human being. And I think sort of this kind of ties into the previous questions, like what are the barriers or what are the limits in terms of kids' television? There's something absolutely wonderful in making programs for kids because you can include and focus on material that in adult television you may not. I've done so much sort of hostile environment and sort of like frontline reporting where it's you go for the shocking, you go for the tragic, you go for the worst of the worst because it's somehow the only way you now engage audiences. Whereas working with kids and doing topics for kids, you get to actually look at some of the magic which is day-to-day life. And so in terms of stopping from being patronising, it's quite the opposite. It's how do you engage with that way of seeing the world? How do you engage with what is playful, what is joyful? And I think it's just you meet people at their level and you share their experience, because if we start throwing in those filters of that isn't interesting or that isn't fascinating enough, then you start streamlining down a lane that doesn't give you the variety and contrast, which is what's so beautiful between the different ages, cultures, life experiences.
And I think also you know, you're letting children tell their own stories. So if you're kind of really giving them the voice, then you're not patronising them because it is very much their voice. And I think in terms of things like, you know, with voiceover, you might write the voiceover, but then we'd always kind of, whoever is voicing it, you'd work it through with them to make sure, you know, it's not our kind of adult works trying to be kind of youthful. It's, you know, it is kind of how...
What about the narration in Boy and the Bicycle? How did that...
Well... We originally wanted Ahmed to do the voiceover.
Yeah.
But for a number of different
logistical reasons that didn't work out. So we worked very hard to find a Syrian refugee boy of a similar age in Bristol to voice it, and we did finally find Adil, who it was kind of that hard balance of finding somebody who was a recent enough refugee that he still had an accent, but equally had been here long enough that he could speak good English and was easily understandable.
And also the authorship in Marvellous Messy Minds, obviously the video diaries, you get very direct kind of authorship from them.
Yeah, because it is about them, and it's completely from them. We don't speak for them; they speak for themselves. And that's really important. Really, really important that you don't speak for kids, especially when it's on really challenging issues such as their mental health. They want to tell you how they feel,
And that's part of the casting process, getting kids, 3 kids, who really wanted to tell their story. And you can see that, particularly if you watch the whole film, but even from the clip, you can tell how much Oliver's just passionate about telling his story. And in a sense, we could have made an hour with each of them, couldn't we? Because they were just such strong kids. But we wanted to kind of put them together because it gave that kind of depth of kind of exploring different mental health conditions, and they, you know, their support was there for each other, but each of them was so passionate. Libby was so passionate about getting her message across, and Kez, who is the most fantastic person to work with, honestly, she's just a wonderful commissioner because she's really creative, and for me it's all about the creativity. So I want to work with a commissioner who's going to add, and this is what Kez does at every stage, which is so lovely. And so Kez had this idea for the film, which was to get the kids at the very beginning in video diary to tell us why they wanted to make a film about mental health. So even though we've kind of seen that with Stephen Fry's wonderful films, and I made a film with Ruby Wax for Channel 4, so we've seen celebrities kind of talk about their mental health. Even Zola, you know, does that, but not for children to do it. I think it's an incredibly powerful way to start the film, just say, look, you know, this is why I want to make this film, just wanting to kind of break down the stigma. And I think for the children watching, you know, that's very empowering. And actually we did get a lot of feedback, didn't we, from parents, and Nadell's got one of the letters that we got, which I think just makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah. This letter came through, and I'm just going to read it. It said, my daughter is very much like Libby. Loves singing, will wear headphones and pump music to block things out, and is very bright to seemingly bubbly on the outside, but has some paralyzing anxiety issues at times, if not in control of routines, weather, dark-related things. I've been really struggling to get her to accept some help to cope before the start of secondary school this year, but it's always been met with huge resistance or worrying. I just wanted to say a huge thank you for the marvellous Messy Minds programme episode. I came down to my children watching it on iPlayer this morning and caught the end of it. I've just watched it all through myself, through tears of wow, finally this may make her see it's normal and there's help, stroke hope, as it had given my 11-year-old daughter a huge insight into other people struggling as she is. So that's what you want to do, basically. You want other young people to think it's okay. They're not on their own dealing with whatever demons, effectively, that they're dealing with.
And there is help, I mean, because that's what's so important, to get that kind of message of kind of, you know, that you can learn to control your anxiety, you can learn to control your panic attacks, or you know what a panic attack is and you can respond to it. You can, the child who has the most serious mental health condition in the film is Oliver, and he had very debilitating OCD from being extremely young. One of the little cuts we did make in that film actually is that he used to say to his mom every night, am I going to still be alive in the morning? And this was from the age of 5, and literally every night, you know, before he cleaned his teeth, is this toothpaste going to kill me? Will I still be alive in the morning? And that's when she knew and Dad knew that he had a problem, and they got help for him. And
Did you film that?
No, well, we did film it. We did film the conversation between Mom and him.
And did you...
And we did make the decision, I've just remembered, we did make the decision to take that out because we just felt, even though it's actually a good tip, I mean, I'm sure most parents would know if they had a child who, you know, had as much of a problem as Oliver did. But we just felt that actually it was a bit too much, you know, the fact he was saying this every night. And we didn't want to kind of encourage, you know, children to kind of, you know, become more anxious than they might be, you know, children like this little girl, you know, so we're always kind of balancing and thinking about literally every word that we put in and every word that we leave in. And
because obviously my instinct as a filmmaker is like, that's a great piece of thing.
Yeah.
I'd want to put that in the film. If it was for an adult audience.
If it was for an adult audience, and
yes.
That's maybe going back to your question before, that's actually the answer, isn't it? That we're just kind of constantly thinking about the welfare of our audience as well as the long-term welfare of our contributors. And so what we want ideally is a film that they've totally engaged with, that shows clearly their narrative arc, of learning how to get better. And what's amazing about Oliver is he literally couldn't go into his garden, and now he's joined, it shows in the film, he joins the army cadets, and he gets absolutely filthy, and he's got absolutely no problem anymore with being outside. And he talks so profoundly. He said, I now feel I'm able to live my life instead of just thinking about my life. And he's really out there kind of, and has this wonderful relationship with his parents, which I think comes across, which is a good example of how parents should be, in the same way that in I Am Leo, the relationship with Mom, who's a cleaner. When we went, I took Leo and his mom to get the International Emmy over in Cannes, which was really exciting, even though they missed their flight. And we had to I was very cross with EasyJet. They were 5 minutes late, and EasyJet wouldn't let them on because they'd been held up in security. So anyway, they did make it out, which is fantastic, all in time. And I remember Leo turning around to his mom and saying, Mom, you just imagine if there was a cleaning award and you'd be getting the job as the kind of, the award as kind of best cleaner in the world, and look, I'm here getting this award. And the reason why I mention that is because her parenting is so exquisite, I think, with Leo, and that comes across in the film, and I think she's such a fantastic example, and I just think that it's really important. I think that when we're kind of casting, we're thinking about the parents, partly because of what Steph was saying, she thinks absolutely true, but also because it's just, the parents are kind of setting an example to the other parents that are watching. And it's not something about, it's just wanting to kind of make sure you're choosing people who are very nurturing and who always put their child's needs first.
I feel ready to ask the question now, because I wanted to get into both examples about why do you make films for kids and why does it matter? Because I feel with the letter and everything else, we're getting to that place. So why do you do it? I mean, the budgets are less. It sounds much tougher. There's so much more ethical dilemmas. So why? And it's a difficult thing to do. It's not easy. So why do you make children's programs?
Well, I love making children's programs. I mean, I think for us, it's there's a real passion to make programs that kind of represent children. Can be kind of children are exposed to so much in terms of kind of advertising and just generally a lot of kind of crap that's out there on the internet. And I think to be able to make programs that are, they're entertaining, they're educational, they open their eyes to different worlds, different, people, different types of people, all of that. And I mean, I've got 2 children, so I kind of, as a parent...
How old are they?
15 and 13. Yeah. And I just think it's really important that they have programs as well that are challenging. There are challenges in watching a lot of the My Lives, and it's kind of, we make Ice Stars, which is about ice skating, but actually it's always looking at the things that are kind of just things about growing up, whether it's friendships, parents, bereavements, bullying at school. It's all these issues, and it just really, really helps people to kind of just see, just very small things that they might relate to, or very big issues that they might, get a deeper understanding. If they've got a refugee child coming into their class at school, the fact they've watched Boy on the Bicycle might just make them that bit more understanding and welcoming. Sorry, I could rabble on for ages, but I'll shut up now.
This is the heart of it. This is why we're here. So
yeah, I think from my side, this is the first child program I've made. Everything else I've done has sort of been the nitty gritty adult stuff. And I think for me, what has been, when I found out that all these awards had been given to the Boy on the Bicycle, I was sort of choked up, because ultimately, as much as there's the filmmaking aspect of it, the reason why I think it's successful is because these are incredible young children who are facing one of the most difficult things anyone could ever face in their lifetimes. And there is still this extraordinary resilience, joy, laughter, and preciousness. And I think despite it being a program for kids, it means that adults can see what kids are experiencing as well. And I think there's a real shortage within the media world of what is the experience of children. This is why we need to help resolve the situation that is going on. This is the next generation, and these kids are just gorgeous, and they need all the help, love, and protection we could possibly ever afford them.
There's this old adage which they used to say, I think it's from the Victorian times, wasn't it? Kids are supposed to be seen and not heard. I'm really complete opposite of that. I think that kids have to have a voice. We have to give them an opportunity to tell us about their worlds. And that's, for me, my favourite children, but they would probably be really cross if I called them children, are teenagers. I'm really, really annoyed about the way that our press effectively vilifies them and demonises them. And it doesn't actually look about the challenges that teenagers of today have to deal with. When I was coming up, I didn't know anything about social media. I didn't know about Facebook and tweet this and Instagram that. They've got quite a lot to deal with, and it's really important for us to sort of nurture them and champion them and give them opportunities to tell us about their lives, really. And that's why I'm so passionate about working with youngsters.
I think a lot of bullying comes about because of ignorance, and so I think if you can, widen the circle of understanding and compassion through these films, it's a way of fantastically educating people. It's got to be entertaining, but it's all kind of show not tell whenever you can. That's why we use a lot of actuality. But essentially, it's about kind of educating children about difference, about enabling them to kind of find their own identity, their own place in the world, but also understand other people. So hopefully it makes the world a better place.
Thank you. I think we're almost at the time for some questions, but I just want to show two other clips. Can we play clip 8, please? My Big Elephant Rescue. I just really wanted to show that clip. Can you just explain very briefly what the film is and talk about that clip?
So what happened is actually Natasha and Joe, who are the two kids, it was their parents got in touch with our company because they'd seen other films that we'd made and said, oh, we're trekking with elephants. We're going to rescue these 2 elephants and we're trekking through the Thai forest. Do you want to come and make a film with us? And of course we were like, yes, it sounds fantastic. And what had happened is that Natasha and Joe had been on holiday to Thailand and they'd found out about the fact that elephants aren't treated very well. They're trained in these tourist camps to do tricks and to give tourists rides, and as a consequence, they're trained through pain, basically. That's the way it works. So as a consequence, they've set up a charity to raise money to take the elephants back to the hill villages where they're originally from and pay the villagers the equivalent of what the villagers would get if their elephants were performing in a tourist camp. And so it's kind of educational in lots of ways, because a lot of teenagers, do, luckily some of them, get a chance to go to Thailand. They all want to ride on elephants, put it on their Facebook page. Well, this is the other side of that story. This is the reality of how those elephants are treated. So the best films are when you've got this really strong narrative arc, like with Me, My Dad and His Kidney. You're following like a dad giving his son, with the son receiving the dad's kidney, and you've got that kind of real journey with Jeopardy and Heron, and that was the same with this. So we had to kind of think really carefully about the risk assessment. Was massive, because elephants can get angry, and there had been a case actually of somebody involved in a CBBC film who was killed a few years ago, through the elephant charging. So we had to take the whole thing really seriously, and we sent two shooters, but the assistant producer, Sunny, Kang, and the shooter, producer, director, Phil, to make sure they could back each other up, which was really important because Phil injured himself and Sunny did have to take over. So it's fantastic that we had 2, and equally we had 2 cameras, and one of the cameras did break down. So, we did lots of things to kind of limit what we got, but that particular sequence, Phil just is a fantastically hard-working shooter, producer, director, and he just had the camera ready, so he caught Byfern when she fell, which obviously was totally unanticipated. But what happened is that it was quite interesting when we saw the first cut, and this is where I come in as an exec producer, not just having to do all the boring, great big fat risk assessment, but, it was interesting that I think when you're a shooter, producer, director, you can, and I used to do that job myself, you can get really close to your own footage when you've shot it, and especially when you've been lucky enough to catch the whole of the elephant falling off, the baby elephant, the star of the show, disappears down the crevasse, and you've got it, yes, So it is fantastic, you've got it, it's great. But actually, if you show all of it, it doesn't have nearly the same power, because the first cut, it really looked like Byfern had gone to the edge of the crevasse and deliberately slid down. It just didn't work at all. And so we had to kind of it was less is more, you know. It was Phil's footage. He'd managed to get it all. And so this is where I think when it's still important, I think, for shooter producer directors to work with editors so that the editor brings that objectivity, and then the exec as well brings the objectivity, and so does Kez when she views. So we were able to get that sequence in a way that was really much more dramatic. And I haven't brought the original to show you, but it really did kind of transform it just because there was actually too much of the footage.
Because I when I watched it, I assumed that you'd press record, it took a few seconds, and you just caught that bit.
Yeah, no, it's very deliberate, and you can't, you know, without me just explaining to it, probably it doesn't go in, but it honestly wasn't dramatic before. It looked like Byford had very deliberately, you know, slid down, wasn't, yeah. So it's kind of, it just works with the kind of music and everything as well.
And just, can we play the last clip as well? Oh, well, it's not the last one. The clip 9, Ahmed's final words. Those last words, "Oh Syria, I miss you so much. Look at me." I mean, how did all that come about? And it's such a great end to the film.
I have to say, Ahmed is, well, an extraordinary young man. Incredibly poetic in his way of speaking. And yeah, that all came about naturally. For example, even taking him to the bird shop, his own allegory of being, you know, I'm a caged bird in this camp. Totally unproduced, unstructured. It was just, we were just interested in the fact that there was canaries for sale, and because it's the only life form in this desert. And so for him, that was his natural allegory, but also sort of coming out to that final bit. I was really curious to see how, if you could see the Syrian border from there, and he entirely led all of the ideas and the feelings himself. All of his feelings were very much on his sleeve.
It was very powerful. I think that's a really good point for questions. So if you've got questions, I think we've got some microphones at the back. If you could just stick your hand up. And so one there and one here. Start with the one here. That'd be great. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm a producer from Norway. I also do children documentaries, international co-productions also. And I wonder if you can talk a little about the international aspects. I mean, I guess these films have been traveling around international also. Do you collaborate with your films with other producers? So that was first. And also, I wonder if BBC could also answer if you also take in a lot of international documentaries for kids.
Unfortunately, the programmes don't sell at the moment, so we kind of make them out of love as much as anything else. You know, the other programmes we make do sell, not the current affairs, but we do make pop docs which sell around the world, and some of our documentary series do as well. But the current affairs and the children's, you know, we make sure that we keep everything in the black, so they kind of wash their own face, so to speak. But there is a new deal that's exciting that's been done by an entrepreneurial distributor who's put together all the different My Lives that have been made by different companies and has put them together as a series. And now he's trying to sell that series. And I think he's got, you know, some interest. Yeah, that's brilliant. But that's the first time, and, you know, we've been doing them for 4 years or so.
And okay, also I'm interested in the financing, but that's because I understand you pay for all of it. Is it no kind of financing anywhere else for films for children?
Well, we haven't sort of looked for any. I mean, like you were saying, with the sales, so iStars is selling as well internationally. But no, I mean, we haven't kind of actively gone out and sought any co-production. I think with co-production, it does raise certain issues, because obviously it would have to be the right subject, and we are talking to a couple of different production companies from different countries about whether we can make that work, but it has to work in both countries. I think the thing about British children's television is it's very sophisticated. Do you know what I mean? And so it's kind of, and the way we're doing it with kind of video diary and stuff, we'd have to find something that was, you know, just as sophisticated that we could put together, you know, as a co-production deal, and, you know, we'd certainly be interested and open to that.
Okay, can I just... Yes, can we just have one question? If there's time, we'll come back to Kez. Yes?
Okay, it's great to see there's the international element. In a lot of UK, or some UK clips we've seen, and certainly other why that's obviously...
It seems that sometimes there's, because you are looking for out of the ordinary stories and articulate children, it can often feel like there's a lot of sort of very sort of middle-class children. And I wonder how much class is an issue and a consideration in choosing your topics and your contributors, and any perhaps challenges in doing so. That's going to sort of nitty-grittier stories.
I'm a very working class South London girl, come on. No, there is seriously nothing to do with class. It's about, because it's very much about the child being able to speak for themselves, that is the only kind of litmus test. Can you talk to us about how you're feeling? Can you let us know what your world is like? That's it.
But I think you're absolutely right, Robin, that it can be an issue, and I think it's really important to us to kind of, have diversity in our programme. So when we're casting, we kind of work really hard to make sure that the cast are diverse in every way, and that, that does include class.
Well, just in terms of diversity, obviously ethnicity is something you can see, and class, I think, is one of the biggest issues in diversity today, in terms of especially working in TV behind the camera, but also it's contributors as well. When you look at TV today and you look at programmes about benefits and all that, it does kind of feel sometimes that middle class people are laughing at working class people. That's a cynical view, but I think that's an interesting question and point. Do you want to answer that? Well,
we've made 3 My Lives, and one was about a circus boy, so absolutely, kind of living sort of outside the class system as a traveller. One was about a girl from rural Southern Ireland, born with no limbs, again, very working class family. And then it was interesting with Boy on the Bicycle, because obviously it's within the refugee camp, and actually, Ahmed was from a more middle class family back in Syria, hence he was the one that could speak English. And even within that, it was interesting kind of looking at the class system, because you could kind of see it within the camp, but kind of very sort of lightly touched on within the programme. But I think, it's an ongoing kind of issue for us, isn't it, to kind of be diverse on and off screen and kind of work as hard as we can to kind of bring new people into the industry, off screen, and it's kind of
just going to say
ongoing.
In terms of Ethan's mum came from Streatham. Ethan's dad was a refugee himself, so they're very working class backgrounds.
I accept Robin's point there, because I think you can end up kind of going for the articulate kids. But Leo, wasn't at all middle class, but maybe we didn't do enough to kind of make that clear within the programme. That's perhaps something that we need to do, where we need to kind of show more about what their parents' jobs are, etc. Because as soon as a kid comes across as being very articulate, there's often an assumption that they're therefore from a middle-class family, which often isn't necessarily the case.
Last night, Ken Loach was here, and he said this thing. He said, what propels you onto the next job is dissatisfaction with the work you've just done. There's always something missing. Is there anything that as a filmmaker, I always look back at my films and think, oh, I wish I'm not totally dissatisfied with them, but I'm like, oh, I could have done that better. Is there anything in The Boy on the Bicycle or Marvellous Messy Minds you think, oh, would have been nice to maybe change that slightly? Or
Well, with Libby, who was absolutely amazing, and she did a brilliant job, and fantastically courageous in terms of sharing her mental health condition with us. But I do wish that during the filming period, she did have a kind of bit of a, difficult time that she went through, which we were told about, but we could, she wouldn't record video diary about it at the time, which is such a shame, because we got that with Ethan, and I think the bit that we showed you kind of in the very top montage where he talks about has just been excluded, and, he's all over the place with the video diary, and I think that was so expressive and so good, and I wish we'd been able to persuade Libby to do that.
Where does she live?
Well, she lives in Cornwall, so it was an issue.
Where do you live? Manchester.
We're in Manchester. So we couldn't just kind of, even if we'd have leapt on a plane, we wouldn't have got there in time. But I wish we'd kind of talked, I suppose what I would do next time, and I know Adele, had kind of done this anyway with Ethan, but I would just kind of talk about the importance for the child to be kind of as transparent as they can be with the audience, because they always have a chance to watch and edit, particularly because they're doing the commentary, and, in the same way that Rachel doesn't put words in the kids' mouths, we don't, they help us write the scripts, they're in there recording it. So they've still got a kind of veto, if you like, on anything that they're unhappy with at that stage. And I think we can express to them how important it is for them to be totally honest with that video diary and not worry if their hair isn't perfect or, they're not kind of as articulate as they want to be, because that's often when the best video diaries come.
Well, I'd just say there were two things. One, to have had more time, because, it was a huge
Sorry,
pressure.
how long did you have to make that film?
4 days to shoot, and we could only shoot between 8 a.m. to 3 p.m.
That's a 30-minute film.
Yeah.
And how long did you have to edit it?
Well, the edit was quite quick because we didn't have that much to kind of to choose from. I mean, thankfully, everything that we had was amazing. So really, it was just a matter of piecing it together. But
how long did you have?
Well, we edited it in less than 3 weeks. It was a fast turnaround.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's quick.
The whole thing was fast. In fact, what was very, very slow, and that was the other thing, it's the kind of the bureaucracy of setting it up. I mean, we didn't get permission to enter into that camp until the day that Jeannie and Steph flew out. So for me, we had this whole commission sitting there saying to Kez, of course it's fine, Kez. Yeah, we're all set and ready to go. Yeah, it's perfectly normal not to have the kind of, any of the paperwork through at this late stage in the day, and kind of, fudging it, and me and Jeannie calling each other saying, oh. But, we got there in the end. So.
Any other questions? Yep. We have one here and then one there.
I think you partly answered the question, actually. So I've got 3 very quick ones. How different is the final version to your original?
So when you mean original, do you mean first cut?
Original ideas.
Original idea,
So the
yeah.
original ideas, how different is the final version to that? What do the contributors tend to think when they watch it at the end? And how long does it take, generally, from beginning of idea to delivery?
Okay, should we start, Kat, should we start with you with how long does it take from beginning to end?
Well, I think we usually allow more like kind of, a minimum of kind of 10 to 15 days shooting, to be honest. So 4 days is incredibly, it's incredibly successful that you've managed to do that in 4 days. But no, I mean, what we're trying to do as well is, because we're trying to capture a journey that can often be dictated. So, for example, with the film about the elephant rescue, we had the trek itself, which was 8 days long, a couple of days before that in Thailand, and then we had some time before that, down in when they were prepping to go off to the trek.
I think we need to quicken up now. Okay. And how long, what was the other one?
In edit, we take 3 weeks.
3 weeks. How different was the idea from how different was the final film from the original idea?
Well, our original idea for Boy on the Bicycle was kind of loose, in as much as it was sort of showing the life in a refugee camp, and it definitely shows the life in a refugee camp because we hadn't met our contributors. We didn't know what they were going to be like, and they're amazing.
What was the last question? What did the contributors think?
All the contributors I've ever worked with, and anything I've ever worked on, have always been really happy. But seriously, that's the truth.
I want to work
with you.
That.
That's the truth, because it's about transparency and integrity and all the rest of it.
How about you?
I mirror that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, and just want to make, I think both Rachel and Kat can announce something today. Have you got another My Life commission?
Yes.
So what's yours and what's yours?
Well, ours is, so Adele, who did the voiceover, is a refugee living in Bristol, and so our next film is going to follow Adele over the next couple of months as he kind of welcomes other refugees coming into Bristol.
Great, and what's yours?
Our idea is, it's Adele's idea actually, it's the Air Cadets, and so we've got access to the Air Cadets. It's their 75th anniversary this year. We're watching 4 young people from working class backgrounds, Robin, learning how to fly for the first time.
I'm really sorry, we're out of time, but just to say, The Boy on the Bicycle is currently playing on iPlayer, and if you've not seen it, please do. It's a great film, and Marvellous Messy Minds will be there on the iPlayer from 18th of June after 3 p.m, and My Big Elephant Rescue is on the iPlayer from the 26th of June after 3 p.m. And also, if you haven't been on the BAFTA website, go to BAFTAguru There's amazing content on there which is free, and hopefully it will inspire you, as this session hopefully has done as well. And just thank you so much for the panellists, and to Kez, who's beautifully produced this session. I've never worked in children's TV. I actually haven't watched much children's TV, but I spent a lot of time watching these films and getting to know these guys over the last few weeks, and I've been really inspired. So thank you.